All right, so in this video, we're going to go over some very important nutrients, two to be exact, that you're going to want to consider taking because of the statistics I'm about to share with you based on science, on their effects on affecting not only your risk of death, but overall health. And what's interesting about this is that if you look at the research, so many of us has been shown to be deficient in these nutrients, but we're not really taking action to take care of them. And also the mass media, of course, is not telling us. And of course, our doctors typically are not telling us to take these supplements. So we're going to go over all of that science. And I'm going to also recommend a general good multivitamin and how your one-a-day vitamins that you might be taking are actually completely worthless. In fact, some of them are harmful. Now, in case you're watching this video and you haven't seen some of the other stuff, this is Dr. Steve. I have been studying, human function for 30 plus years, multiple degrees in biomechanics and physical therapy, master's physical therapy, doctors in physical therapy. I used to teach physiology at Rutgers Medical Program to doctors, have a very good understanding of chemically how the body works, mechanically how the body works, mentally how the body works, energetically how the body works. And in fact, about 26 years ago, I had a supplement company. We made the first pre-workout products, post-workout products, the first all-encompassing anti-inflammatory products on the market. We literally launched those niches in the industry, right? And so it's my passion to sort of share the science of this with you in a way that's easy to understand and very digestible and very actionable, right? So let's just jump right into it. So I picked some general stuff as well as some research, right? Just to mix it up. Again, we can, if you're interested in a deep dive science of this, comment in the video. I can, of course, geek out about the deep stuff, but I try to keep the data very consumer friendly, if you will, right? And so here is just a general article that talks about magnesium. And you can see here, it shows that 75% of the people are not meeting their requirements in magnesium. Well, why is this important? Well, magnesium is involved in over 300 different chemical reactions in your body. It's necessary for 300 different chemical reactions. And so if you're deficient in magnesium, these chemical reactions cannot happen well. And one of them, very importantly, has to do with the use of vitamin D, right? In other words, if you're deficient in magnesium, your body cannot use vitamin D well. And vitamin D, as you will learn in a few minutes, is absolutely essential during this time, especially during this time, and you're going to learn about that, right? And so again, 75% of us are deficient in magnesium. That's like saying 75% of us, even if we have enough vitamin D, we're not using it well, right? And so what are some of the effects of magnesium deficiencies? Well, muscle twitches and cramps. We look at mental disorders. We have osteoporosis there. We have fatigue and muscle weakness. We have high blood pressure. We have asthma. We have irregular heartbeat, right? And so long-term, right, this is not about taking supplements for the rest of your life. You need supplements because if you're deficient, you're just not going to get enough magnesium nor vitamin D from food to bring it up, right? And so here are some foods, right? Almonds, pumpkin seeds, dark chocolate, peanuts. I would not eat popcorn, basically, unless you get organic, non-GMO popcorn and pop it yourself. Bag microwave popcorn is actually probably the most toxic food you could ever eat. And so I would recommend sticking to the almonds and pumpkin seeds and actually dark chocolate, right? Again, that's the long term. You want to make sure you're getting those foods on a regular basis. But for the short term, at least for the next 3 months, it typically takes about 2 to 3 months to boost these levels back up to normal. You're going to want to take supplements. Right. Again, later on, I'll cover what supplements and how to get it and all that stuff. Right. So this is magnesium, super important. Now, I'll give you some interesting data that's not on this. I'm reading on magnesium. It's fascinating. If you're deficient in magnesium, it's been shown to feed addiction. Right. Look at what's happening with the opioid crisis, how it took off so much. Well, one of the reasons is if you're deficient in magnesium, it literally feeds addiction. In fact, there's studies showing that if you're deficient in magnesium, your fear of one thing gets generalized into fear into many things. In other words, let's say you have fear of spiders, right? If you're deficient in magnesium, your fear of spiders starts to spread fear into other areas of your life. This is profound, right? And so there's huge psychological implications of deficiencies in magnesium. And that's obviously not being talked about in mass media and, of course, by your doctors, right? And so now, before we get to vitamin D, I want to pause for a second and share with you, in case you didn't know, our bodies, right, from a biological perspective, from a chemical perspective, we run on vitamins and minerals, right? They're the essential things, the chemical things, right? Besides proteins, carbs, and fats, we need vitamins and minerals to do all the chemical reactions that's necessary for us to function optimally. How come doctors don't test our vitamins and minerals on a year-to-year basis, right? They only test for a few, right? Vitamin D, potassium, salt, right? And so the reason they don't is because the system is not designed to prevent illness and disease. How could it? It makes money from you when you're ill and diseased. This is very important to realize, right? It's why your blood work from your physician, right? Physicians are loving humans operating in a system that isn't quite working well and isn't working for your best interest. The system is designed to make the system money. And so, in case you didn't know this, I want to make sure that you know this. Your blood work from your physician hasn't been updated in your lifetime. How is it possible, right? We have the ability to test over 10,000 different things in your body, and your typical blood work looks like 20 to 25 things out of 10,000, right? That's looking at 0.25% of the data to try to figure out, are you healthy or not? Again, technology exponentially increased, blood work exactly the same in your entire lifetime, right? And so we must recognize this and know that the system does not have our best interest. It's time for us to learn these things that you're learning on this video, to empower us to take sovereignty over our own well-being, because the system does not want us to be well. Here's an interesting statistic for you. One diabetic person is worth $250,000 to the industrial medical complex. Why would they ever want to cure diabetes if a diabetic is worth $250,000? Something for you to think about, right? And so my belief is, when you're empowered with the information you're about to get, you can actually take control over your well-being, right? And so let's go into vitamin D, right? So let's look at this. Vitamin D in America, at least 42% of the people are deficient in vitamin D on average. And the highest are African Americans at 82%, followed by Hispanics, 69%, right? And so just keep in mind, if we do the math, if 75% on average are deficient in magnesium, that renders us unable essentially to use vitamin D. And 42% of us are deficient in magnesium or in vitamin D. What does that mean? It means a very, very, very high percentage of us are not using vitamin D well, right? And so, and I can do the math for you quickly. Maybe I'll whip out the calculator later and figure out exactly what that percentage is, but it's extremely high. And so what are the effects of vitamin D deficiency? Well, again, try to use a simple, I'll start with simple and I'll go a little bit more detail, right? So 26 side effects of low vitamin D. Let's just go through them very quickly. This will be very interesting. Obesity, right? Increases risk of obesity. Do we have an obesity problem in America? In case you don't know, yes, we do, right? And so right now, 1/3 of Americans, up to 40% of Americans right now have obesity. Diabetes. Do we have a diabetes problem in America? Yes. If you look at the data, 1/3 of Americans have either pre-diabetes or diabetes. Heart disease, number one killer in America still. 40% of Americans, if 10 people die per day, per year, per month, whatever, 4 out of 10 die because of heart disease. Number one killer still. Cancer's about to overtake it either this year or next year, but right now it's still heart disease. Lupus, preterm birth, multiple sclerosis, PMS issues, much worse if you're deficient in vitamin D or unable to use vitamin D. Inflammatory bowel disease, alopecia or hair loss, insulin resistance, right? That's just fancy for we can't use blood sugar, which eventually leads to diabetes. Eczema, tooth decay, gum disease, Alzheimer's dementia. This is huge. Alzheimer's and dementia is predicted to double every 20 years. I believe that's a severe underestimation based on the data that I'm seeing. UTIs, female incontinence, asthma, schizophrenia, depression, colorectal cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, osteoporosis, rickets, childhood language impairment because of brain dysfunction not happening due to D deficiency, right? Again, all those things related to vitamin D deficiency. Let's look at some actual studies, right? Vitamin D deficiency was also associated with increased cardiovascular mortality, cancer mortality, and respiratory disease mortality. What does that mean? Essentially, in non-fancy terms, it means we're much more likely to die from cardiovascular disease, cancer, and respiratory disease, right? Look at this, right? And so that's an actual study. What's interesting is if we look at this, this says essentially strongly increased respiratory mortality. And this study is directly looking at this, right? In other words, the study, and there's so many other studies that if I were to show you all of them, this would be like a 5-hour video. Vitamin D deficiency, right? Vitamin D deficiency clearly is associated with a much strongly correlated, right? With a higher likelihood of dying from what's going around. I call it the vid, right? And so what does this all mean? It means if you're watching this video, based on these numbers, you have a very, 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 very high chance that you're deficient in one or the other, and likely both. And that puts you at a much higher risk of death. I cannot make it more important than that. Much higher risk of death, right? From cardiovascular disease, which is still the number one killer, followed by cancer, which increases the death of that, and those things long-term will kill you, followed by respiratory disease, which is, there's a thing going around that can kill you instantly. And so and there's so many nutrients people are deficient in, right? So when we test people using a test called SpectraCell, it's a test that looks at the 6-month average of all your vitamins and minerals. And imagine if doctors ran this on a year-to-year basis, the infinite amount of illness that we could prevent. It would be incredible. But again, the system's not designed to do that. But I want you to know that that test is available. And if you're interested, reach out to me. I can send you the information, right? And so when we test people in the last many, many years, everyone we've ever tested has some form of deficiency. And the reason for this is the food supply that we're eating is not as nutritious. Even if you're eating organic food, it's just not as nutritious as it once were, right? There's studies showing that you have to eat 7 oranges today to equal the nutrients of 1 orange from 30 years ago, right? Because they're not rotating the crops, right? And so the soil's being overused and they're just using industrial fertilizers to pump out more food, right? And so this is a very unnatural way of producing food. And so we get very unnatural, unhealthy, low vitamin mineral amounts of food that we're eating, right? And so everyone is deficient in something. And 75% are deficient in magnesium, and you look at 41% are deficient in vitamin D. And so to make it simple for you, I have already selected the proper forms of vitamin D and the proper forms of magnesium. There's so many different forms, and you want to make sure that you're taking vitamin D with K2, right? And so the reason is if you don't take it with a certain type of K, it can basically calcify your arteries, right? Which is horrible, right? That's like heart disease. And so you want to make sure you know how to navigate this in terms of the proper types. There's different forms of vitamin D, just like there's different forms of K, just like there's different forms of magnesium. Again, to make it super simple for you, I've already selected the proper forms for you, put it into a medical portal. The reason I use a medical portal is there's studies showing that if you just get it online, let's say on Amazon, there are counterfeit supplements being sold on Amazon. Right. And so I want to make sure that you're taking safe, right? Because if you buy counterfeit ones, they tested it, they have contaminants in them. So you're buying safe and effective versions of these, which is why I only use a medical protocol FullScript, because they get it directly from manufacturers and they sell medical grade versions that typically the consumers can't buy directly. They only sell to doctors, right? Now, on top of this, I included a multivitamin. And the reason I included a multivitamin is, again, almost everyone we test is deficient in a wide variety of things. And so you want to take a good multivitamin. Now, if you're taking it one a day, know that the studies show they're completely worthless. In fact, many of them are harmful because they use toxic forms of vitamins. Vitamin E is a great example. They use a toxic form of vitamin E that's unnatural because it's the cheapest, and that can actually harm you, right? And so the multivitamin and all vitamins and minerals and supplements that you take, you want to be very careful with your choice in terms of who's making it, right? Because they can use cheap forms of it. And so I chose a multivitamin that has all the best absorbable forms of the nutrients It also has probiotics. It also has digestive enzymes to help you break down the food, the fiber, the nutrients so you can absorb it better, which is huge. Most of you that are watching this, I guarantee you your gut is not functioning well because we test people and we know this. And also, I also recommend in the protocol krill oil. I won't get into the deep science of krill oil. You may have heard about fish oil, right? Fish oil is essential, right? We need omega-3s. Our bodies can't produce it. We must eat it. But more importantly, we need the DHA and EPA in the fish oil because it's healthy for our brain. Now, the reason I recommend krill oil essentially is 300% better absorbed than fish oil. You just get more bang for your dollars, basically, right? And so I recommend all humans take these for a long time. And I recommend taking the magnesium and the vitamin D for at least 3 months, and you can start to not take them. But the multivitamin and the krill oil, I recommend taking for a long time. And I'll share something with you. I eat 15 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And when I was tested, I'm still deficient because it's almost impossible to get all the nutrients from food these days. Like when you go to your doctor, like, oh, just eat your foods and you'll be fine. They're not looking at science. Our food supply is just not as nutritious as it once were, right? So someday I'm going to have my own garden, permaculture, grow my own food and all that stuff. But right now I'm buying organic fruits and vegetables and I'm still deficient, right? And so I hope you take this video with all seriousness because of what's happening, what's going around. And you can see that deficiencies in magnesium D causes higher chance of death. That is pretty serious. And I'm hoping that you not only act on this video for yourself, I'm hoping, one, that you share this with other people because I believe this video and recommendation will directly save lives. Directly, just based on numbers and statistics. And I'm hoping that you realize that if we want our family members to be healthy, if we want our friends to be healthy, if we want our coworkers to be healthy, we do it. It's not what we tell them, it's how we show up. And so when you take action on this to embody and to take sovereignty and control over your own well-being, you are literally exemplifying this for those around you, right? It's like putting a pebble in the water. You're casting the ripple. And so I believe now is the greatest opportunity in humanity for us to make a difference, right? 10 years ago, you took some supplements, you got healthy. You're not saving any lives, really. You're cool, right? Like people are like, wow, you're amazing, you're healthy. Right now, when you do this, you can directly impact and save lives. And so as much as I crack jokes on internet, I want to make sure that this is taken with all seriousness and that you act on this because there is absolutely an urgency because of the thing that's going around that causes respiratory death. Vitamin D directly decreases chances of that, proven by research, right? And so again, I'm hoping that you help me share this message to the world because we can't rely on mass media to do it because they do not profit from this information. So it's time for us to take sovereignty over our own health and stop letting our health be manipulated by the industrial medical complex.